Hello YouTube, my name is Alex, and this is the part 3 to the series on the science behind orgone. Now, I talked briefly about the three-dimensional use of orgone shapes to intensify orgone, but in fact, it does not even need to be a conductor and a dielectric, as orgone usually is, to create an effect that we can perceive and measure. For instance, the Great Pyramid of Giza and any scale model thereof has been shown to have dehydrating and preservation effects, which cannot be screened with Faraday's cage, which is to say they're not electromagnetic, and we don't know what that energy consists of, just like orgone. Now, the pyramid energy isn't quite the same manifestation of effects as orgone, but it is nevertheless a apparent density of some form of energy which we can't measure, and that itself suggests that there is some medium which is capable of carrying these energy forms, both orgone and pyramid energy and all forms of subtle energy, and that medium is referred to as the ether. The ether is basically a field of energy so fine that it penetrates every living, not just every living thing, everything, period. Every material thing is fully immersed in this ether. And the ether behaves in certain ways and presents itself in certain ways, and we're still getting familiarized with it. It's been a rocky road, especially because Einstein tried to disprove the ether, and for the last almost 100 years we've been living in the dark, not pursuing any rational forms of scientific endeavorment because we have been denying the ether's existence, which Nikola Tesla has shown on many occasions. There is no denying the existence of the ether. It exists. So the orgone energies and other subtle energies are forms of either strains, you could call them, or basically effects on the ether. So we know that not only does certain forms of geometry affect the ether, but it seems to be affected by combinations of conductors and dielectrics in the form of what is referred to as a capacitor. A capacitor, when it is not in a circuit, it basically acts like an electrostatic screen. Any energy that is fluctuating around, which there always is energy fluctuating around, hits that screen and gets trapped in counterspace, in a different dimension, between the lattices of the dielectric, in between the two conductors. And so that is basically a transference of energy from one form to another. The one form being electric in our local environment, and the other form being a longitudinal wave or a stress of some sort in the dielectric itself. Now, stresses in the dielectric have been shown by Thomas Townsend Brown to be related to non-local waves as well. Non-local waves can be called scalar waves. He referred to these particular waves that he was researching as gravity waves. He said that gravity, basically any device which produces a gravity wave can produce a wave which travels an infinite distance and does so instantly. And that is basically the same definition as a scalar wave as we know it today, although I don't use that nomenclature anymore. I don't prefer it. Longitudinal wave is a more descriptive term when you're talking about that type of wave. I'm going to get back to subtle energy now. So I have here a pyramid array. These are a bunch of small-scale pyramids, 3D printed. The exact ratio in terms of size of the length of the base and the height as the Great Pyramid of Giza. And this pyramid array does seem to produce effects on, for instance, I left some banana on this, and I left some banana, a few feet away, a few yards away, and the way they dehydrated were completely different, but it actually can be measured in many other ways. Patrick Flanagan talks about some of the ways you can measure these subtle energy fields, but Thomas Townsend Brown was actually getting readings out of rocks. Rocks were responding to waves in the ether, basically, and producing electricity in correspondence with them. If you probed around the rock at certain points, you could find it, but it took some perseverance. And so many rocks do indeed have that function. And there are waves all around us that we can't see operating in the ether that we're completely ignorant of. So how can we take advantage of what we know about how to influence the ether in order to, let's say, promote our health? In the case of orgone, that's what we're trying to do. So it's been shown that if you sleep under a pyramid shape, it will lead to better sleep patterns and lower stress and many other things. It's very healthy for you to do. Now, if you were to put these in your pillow, you would have a similar effect. You would want to put permanent magnets on a pyramid array like this, and the permanent magnets are actually how a pyramid energy is formed. It is the magnetic field going perfectly through two sides of the pyramid and parallel to the other two, which seems to form the energetic effect, as well as an electric potential between the base and the top, which exists naturally between the ground and the ionosphere. And that electric potential also amps up the pyramid's energy. So the pyramids are an interesting case of energy creating device. Patrick Flanagan also spoke about how spheres arranged in Merkaba patterns, those also, like for instance, a glass marble in a Merkaba pattern would create a beneficial effect in the surrounding area to all biological systems. And you could also put magnets there and an electric potential, and those would aid in the effect of creating this subtle energy. Now I'm going to take it a step further and talk about the work of Dr. Akimov in Russia, who, along with a bunch of other people, have researched what they've come to refer to as torsion waves, Torsion, torsion waves. And these are waves of time itself. So fluctuations in the density of time, which they proved cannot be screened, and are emitted by certain materials, those materials having certain sacred geometry shapes, like a honeycomb from a bee's hive. And they showed that it is actually screened by aluminum. So the aluminum acts as a mirror for this energy up to a certain point. Once the mirror becomes saturated, Patrick Flanagan said, for instance, in the case of his pyramids, he put aluminum over it, and after 2 weeks, the aluminum would become saturated, the pyramid energy would come back through, and once he put that aluminum anywhere, that aluminum had the same energy carrying with it as the pyramid itself. So using a mirror, you could focus or amplify it if the aluminum was curved or convex. And there are just a lot of things you could do with that from a practical standpoint when you're experimenting with effects on the ether from these types of energies. Now, spinning things emit torsion waves. There's a lot of research on torsion waves. I recommend you go look it up. In Russia, it has not been called crazy to research the ether or things that suggest the ether exists. So they actually have funded and supported it, and their research is much further ahead than ours as a result. When I say ours, I do mean our public sector, because I do believe our government sector has a lot more research than they're sharing with us on these topics, which is why it's relatively unknown. But anyways, this video is getting a little long, so I'm going to try to wrap it up here. Spinning things like a vortex in water, for instance, will create this energy. All spinning things. Water is an interesting thing to speak about because it actually absorbs and accumulates these energies. So you can't generate enough orgone or pyramid energy to saturate water. It just keeps taking more and more, and it has interesting effects, which are always positive when you drink it slowly.